innovation team where all of the ideas, inspiration and magic happens. So I believe, as we all know, the Metaverse is an increasingly popular topic today. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our amazing guest speaker, Dr. Loretta Chen, co-founder of the Smobler Studios, to take us through the Metaverse and how it can be used, a force for good. So please give her a round of applause. Dr. Loretta Chen.
Thank you so much. Hi, good afternoon everybody. Hi. Hi. Sorry, now I have to confess, I had a really hard morning this morning because not to make anyone upset or get you waxing sympathy, but my mom had a heart attack this morning. I know it is, but it's we don't live forever. So if I appear a little bit out of sorts, it's really because I did have a pretty rough morning. But I also believe in showing up. That's half the battle won, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking time off a very hectic day to come out here and share with us your time. And so just quite briefly, I think in the next 45 minutes or so, we'll make sure we end on time. We'll leave some time for questions as well. So it's really just a real introduction to the Metaverse and what we can do in the Metaverse, and also to share some use case scenarios that we've done at Smobler Studios. And first off, I just want to acknowledge some old friends who have come all this way to visit. Thank you so much, 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, and to new friends who have come to support, and of course some of our partners from Aventis Graduate School. Will share a little bit more about them, and a big thank you obviously to DBS and our friends here, Steph. I don't know where Steph is, our Badger friend Steph, but thank you all so much for having us. So we'll get started, but before I start, any questions now like you would like me to answer as part of my talk story? There must be a reason why you're here. It's to enjoy the air conditioning and to use the bathroom after lunch. Are there any other questions you have about the Metaverse, or what would have brought you here, so that I can try and answer that? Nothing too technical. Don't ask me about the blockchain. Don't ask me about the protocol. Don't ask me how to write a smart contract. But anything about the Metaverse that you'd like me to answer. So I'll make sure I'll address that in the next 40 minutes. No? Okay, so I'll just riff and then feel free to ask any questions as we go. So force for good in the Metaverse. So here, let's get started. So who we are, Smobler Studios is actually Singapore's first official, the Sandbox endorsed Metaverse agency, and it's also the first investee studio focused on integrated Web3 digital strategy and application. And I'm actually going to scoot over to, I don't know what, Sharon, do you mind sort of looking to my bag and helping me find my glasses, because I can't see anybody or anything. So basically that's what we do. We are focused on world building, we're focused on Metaverse strategy as well as IP creation, and over time we've also extended our businesses to include education as well as digital application, and I'll share that with you in just a while. Thank you so much. I keep forgetting I'm pushing 50 and I can't see squat. So, aha, now I can see all your faces, perfect. So this is our team, right? We started really humbly over the pandemic. My co-founder actually lost his work over the pandemic, as most people did. And he actually stumbled across this little known platform known as the Sandbox. And he reached out to me and he said, hey, shall we put in an application for the Game Maker Fund? And back then the Game Maker Fund, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the Sandbox. Yes, okay, some of you are familiar. And if you have more questions on the Sandbox, feel free to ask George. Is he still here? No, maybe he's left. Well, the Sandbox is obviously an open metaverse platform that allows you to play and earn. It allows you to, it has an open marketplace and also has these creator tools like Vox Edit and Game Maker. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But anyhow, so my co-founder over the pandemic had lost his job, and he had approached me with this idea of putting in an application for this open metaverse and to get some land. And it sounded like a really novel idea, and I read the white paper and it sounded quite credible. And so we put in our application, and lo and behold, we started getting land and we started creating. And then fast forward to October of 2021, when Facebook changed its name to Meta, and I think that was when it really blew up, and what we were doing that was considered pop culture and cool became suddenly quite mainstream. So here we are today. Our team has also expanded. We're now in the United States, obviously here in Singapore. My CFO is here, that's Janice, and our head of production, Sharon, is here as well. We have a team in Canada, that's where my co-founder is. He's based out in Canada. We have a huge creative team in Brazil, and also a team in Bhutan. And so over time, we have sort of expanded, working with different brands. Some of them you would recognize, some of them are 10K NFT projects, which we'll talk about. So, which brings us to what is the Metaverse? But before we even talk about, well, what is the Metaverse, let's talk about the current climate, right? So I think in short, there is a lack of understanding and clarity about the Metaverse. Even for us as Metaverse builders and creators, we have to say that we're not 100% sure about where this is headed. I was just talking to someone from Amazon, Ashraf, and we're just saying, we have no idea where this will land. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it is still the Wild Wild West. And anyone who says, I have 100% certainty of where this is headed, like Mark Zuckerberg, we should really sort of rethink what they're saying. Because I think the whole fact is that we are really just at the start, and there's just so much more to be uncovered and discovered. Also, current adoption practices are arduous, they're quite difficult. There's a lack of accessibility, there's a lack of competent builders. That's also why we have our friends from Index Games here, I think from Hong Kong. Are they here? I saw them around just now. There's a lack of coherent communication, and I think fundamentally there's a lack of trust, right? I think I'm a huge fan of Edelman's Trust Barometer, where he sort of acknowledges and looks into, trust between companies, trust between countries, and says that, trust is really a unifying factor. And I think a lot of it today that we see in the Metaverse is that there is a lack of trust. And so for us at Smobler, I think if we really want to say what we do, we really want to say that we want to provide a trustful, trustworthy relationship with all our partners, right? Regardless what we work on with them, whether on the academic front or the digital application or the Metaverse strategy. So fundamentally what we do at Smobler is we humanize the Metaverse, right? We try to take all the tech out of the Metaverse and really try to bring lifestyle, brands, and communities into the Metaverse. So what does that mean? That means that we fundamentally still form really strong partnerships. It's still human capital that matters to us. That's why when DBS invited us to come here, we're like, yes, I'm going to come to Hawaii, from Hawaii, and be here with all of you today. Fundamentally, it's still about creating strong partnerships. So these are just some of the partners that we have, and it's growing by the day. And at Smobler, we are also trailblazers, or at least we like to think so, being sort of so new in the space. We've created the world's first concert venue, also the world's first accessibility park, because accessibility is very close to my heart. As you all know, I live with aged parents and I have osteoarthritis. So we think about trying to create a world without barriers. How can we bring disabled and non-disabled people alike to remove those barriers and access to possibilities? So for example, if you're a singer-songwriter, it could be really hard to seek representation if you are physically immobile, right? I mean, how many Stevie Wonders are there? So we're hoping that with the Metaverse, it can be a force for good to create accessibility to artists, disabled, non-disabled alike, and bring communities together. We also created ASEAN's first Metaverse campus. If Samuel Teo, if you just want to just wave your hands. So Samuel Teo is the general manager of Aventis, and he's also our partner and a visionary, because he volunteered for his campus to be taken on board the Metaverse. So we actually have a very unique partnership that I'll explain a little bit more. We also took the food bank into the Metaverse. They are the first non-profit to come into the Metaverse. So again, a little bit more on that. We also have 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗲, and how many of you here own malls? I mean, please raise your hand if you own a mall. Ashraf, you own a mall? No, yesterday you did, today you don't, okay. Anyone here owns a mall? Well, I don't own a mall. So we figured when we created or had our own space in the Metaverse, one of the things that my co-founder and I decided to do was to create a digital or Metaverse mall, because we wanted to create opportunities for those who won't otherwise be able to own a brick and mortar store, because it's cost prohibitive. So we wanted to provide access and onboarding and sort of hand holding onto the Metaverse as well, to give them like a little pop-up experience in the Metaverse. So this was really how it started. So today what we're going to do in the next 30 minutes or so is to just address some of these big sort of changes in what we call today as Web3, try and create some sort of working definition of what is the Metaverse, and then of course come to our thesis of Metaverse for good. All right, so we'll keep it kind of short and fairly easy. So many people ask, when is the start of Web3? When did all of this really happen? And of course, it's really hard to put a finger on anything when it's happening. But in hindsight, I think a good starting point would be in 2008. the financial crisis of 2008. That fundamentally sort of erupted a huge global distrust in centralized financial institutions. And I remember when I was reading the papers and sort of thinking about all of those young people and families that have been impacted by Lehman Brothers or Bear Stearns or the financial crisis, and all the retirees who lost their money. And I remember, because I was in the United States, I remember thinking, those families who have young people or children, I'm sure they have grown up and they have witnessed how their families have been just sort of decimated by having so much trust in centralized financial institutions. And I think a lot of those sentiments sort of started around that era as well. That's also where you started seeing the rise of the Bitcoin, right? So I think in 2008, I think the seeds were laid. I don't think that it was a sudden sort of parachute, but I think a lot of those sentiments, distrust towards financial institutions definitely started boiling around 2008. And of course, you look back then, during the 2016 elections, obviously we then learned about the fiasco with Cambridge Analytica, and of course now we see even more distrust in big tech, right? Security, privacy, content manipulation. And then of course, just a couple of years ago, we see obviously the pandemic that we're still living with. And in 2021, actually in October 2021, we saw how Facebook changed its name to Meta. I think this just gives us a little bit of in broad brushstrokes, right? Some of these changes that led to these sentiments. So Web3 was not instant, it's not immediate. These are sentiments that sort of grew over time. And if you look back in time too, for those of you who have been around for a little bit longer, like me, it really is an evolution, right? We saw how internet browsers really offered very static established searches from like Yahoo and Google to becoming a little bit more interactive with LinkedIn and with YouTube, and then to where we are today with NFTs selling for like a record 69 million, for example. So this really is an evolution. If I just wanted to put it quite simply, how I would actually define it is this, right? That Web 1 is what I would like to call the information economy, where it's really like a read-only sort of web, right? Where there's limited user interaction, where you're just able to access information. Web 2 is the age that we're in now, which is the age of interaction, right? Like all of you potentially are a media platform, right? Is there anyone here with no social media account at all? Like no Snap, no TikTok, no LinkedIn, no Facebook. So everyone here is a media platform, potentially, right? However, the one thing to recognize is that even if you're Kim Kardashian, and even if you have a huge follower base, the fact is you don't own the platform, right? So I'm also going to take that and link it to why Meta needs to have the Oculus, because lots of people ask that as well, and ask if the Oculus is the only way to enter the Metaverse, and the answer is no. And my answer has a lot to do about owning the train and the train track. So remind me, I'll get there. But my point is, for most of us, we are already transacting in the platform economy because we all own social media platforms. But fundamentally, we don't own the platforms, which is what Web3 aspires to do. Remember, it's still an aspiration. We're not there yet. We're only at the start. So basically what it is that it is what I call the age of identity, immersion, and interoperability. So I'm a teacher by training, right? I'm a professor, so I like to alliterate everything. So Web 1, age of information. Web 2, age of interaction. Web 3, age of identity, immersion, interoperability. If there's anything you take away from today's talk to sound really smart, you just need to remember that. And now the definition of the Metaverse. So remember, Web 3 is Web 3, right? Web 3 is talking about having more immersion, owning more of your identity, and being more interoperable. So let's put that in the parking lot, okay? What is the Metaverse? Anyone wants to attempt a definition aside from 𝗟𝗂𝗶𝗲𝗲? Not yet. So this is 𝗟𝗂𝗶𝗲𝗲's definition. Okay, I'm going to attempt to read it out. It's very lengthy for a reason. It is defined as a massively scaled, interoperable network of real-time rendered 3D virtual worlds that can be experienced synchronously and persistently by effectively unlimited set of users with an individual sense of presence and continuity of data such as identity, history, entitlements, objects, communications, and payments. I'm tired just reading that, right? But the reason why it has to be such a lengthy definition is because we don't really have a clear definition just yet. That's really what it is, right? Academics like us like to have a whole lot of lengthy jargon because we don't really have a definition just yet. However, what he does say is quite salient, and then later on we'll try and break it down. Right? That the key definition or distinction between a Web3 and a Metaverse is that a Web3 really wants to talk about interoperability, identity, and immersion. The Metaverse has a little bit more of that creative economy, right? It wants it to be three-dimensional. It wants it to be virtual. It wants us all to be present 24/7, the ability to be present 24/7 at the same time. So that is where we make those distinctions, because most people always say, okay, what is Web3 and what is the Metaverse? So now you're beginning to see a little bit more of those distinctions, hopefully. Okay. And now I'm going to try and break it down, and then there'll be a pop quiz later, and then I'll ask you what the Metaverse means in your own words. But again, the Metaverse has evolved. It didn't just parachute, it didn't just happen over the pandemic, right? For those of any one of you here, and it's okay, it's a safe space. Anyone here played with Second Life before? I knew Bidget was going to come here and raise his hands. I just knew it. He had to come here and do that. And then, like, a true story, I was at South by Southwest, and there was this girl, and she was so funny. She was like, oh, you know, I walked into this room, and then there was this old dude, you know, talking about Second Life, blah, 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 blah. And he looked like such a boomer. And then it turned out that it was the creator of Second Life. It was quite funny. But anyway, so it really is an evolution, right? We see it evolving from Second Life. For those folks who have PlayStation, again, I know Bidet's going to raise his hands. And then, of course, later on, there's World of Warcraft. You see the evolution into Microsoft acquiring Minecraft. So it really has been a constant evolution to where we are today, right? Most recently in 2022, Microsoft announcing its plans to acquire Activision. So it really has been an evolution, which also points to us that there is big opportunity, and we can attest to the fact that there is big opportunity, because otherwise a big bank like DBS will not be hosting something like this if they didn't see big opportunity in the Metaverse, right? Already Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, both of these big banks predict an $8 trillion Metaverse market. And if you just don't believe me, go on and ask Bidut right there. He is a Metaverse enthusiast, and I think most of us here believe in this, and that's why we're here today. So just a quick Google and a quick search will show you that statistics really speak, right? I think as someone that's running a Metaverse agency, I can tell you that there's a lot of business coming in. So for those of you who still think that the Metaverse is a fad, I'm not here to proselytize or change your mind, but just to have you have an open mind, take what you will, but there is truly a lot of opportunity. So, specifically in Asiaverse, and even then, these slides are already slightly dated. By dated, I mean they're about 2 months old, right? There is a high consumer market if you just look into the Asia-Pacific region itself. In the world's top 10 mobile internet consumer markets, over half is occupied by Asia, right? Just China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Vietnam alone, 90% of consumers in the region actually use smartphones. That's also one of the reasons why we're bullish on the sandbox, because it's a very clear mobile strategy, but that for a later time. So most of us use smartphones. Is there anyone here without a smartphone here today? Right, with his hand up. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was just a fake phone, I know that. So most of us, on average, are on our smartphones for about 4 hours. I check, sometimes I'm on it for 11. Gen Zs and millennials in Asia are immersing themselves in digital consumption. Amongst the 3 billion gamers, more than 55% live in Asia, and that's also one of the reasons why we truly believe, as you all know, that gaming is not the Metaverse, but it definitely is an on-ramp to the Metaverse, right? And Asian consumers are spending more and more of our time online. So all of these are just lifestyle signs that point to you that we are increasingly having a bigger digital presence. And just trends in Asia itself, July 2021, Ministry of Economy and Trade of Japan decides to release an investigative report on possibilities of Metaverse. It's followed suit by the South Korean government, and then by China, etc., etc. And even right here in Singapore, we're having these conversations, right? So let me now just make a quick little segue into gaming. This is a quote from Rex Woodbury of Index Ventures, and he says that even though 3.4 billion people, is there anyone here that doesn't game? I don't, that makes 2 of us. Yay! yay, 3 of us. I don't game at all, which is really funny given what I'm doing. But having said that, even though 3.4 billion people play video games, and even though the industry is larger than music, box office, sports industries combined, gaming still gets a lot of eye rolls. And I used to do that until I started running Smobler. For many people, gaming conjures the image of a teenage boy isolated in his mom's basement, while the reality is that the average US gamer is about 35 years old, and close to half the gamers are actually women. So telling us that gaming is actually deeply social is not about gender divides. And as gaming becomes the on-ramp to digital worlds and crypto economies, we hope that this stigma will fade. We'll stop thinking of gaming as games with an overt objective, but to start thinking of gaming companies as, 1, social networks, and 2, economies. And this is where it kind of leads us, obviously quite naturally, into what I'll be talking about later on, which is our investor company, the Sandbox, and what we're building with them. But to back it up a little bit, I think many of you have probably heard the news that Temasek Foundation, or not Foundation, Temasek funded 𝗟𝗟𝗀𝗃 brands, right? I think many of, I know Ashraf is obviously nodding, and most of you have heard that, yeah. So just to put it in perspective, right, for full disclosure, Temasek invests in 𝗟𝗟𝗃𝗃 brands. 𝗟𝗟𝗃𝗃 brands is a parent company of the Sandbox, and we're an investee company of the Sandbox, just to put it out there. Okay, so 𝗟𝗟𝗃𝗃 brands, obviously Hong Kong-based digital blockchain company, founded by 𝗟𝗂𝗃𝗃, very, very forward-thinking, smart, visionary. They have a portfolio of over 340 brands and a recent investment. But I think one of the points that I really wanted to highlight is that one of their biggest advantage today is the fact that they're an early adopter. And I think that's something that we talk a lot about, even when we were talking to DBS and we were talking about strategies. I think one of the things that we like to urge all of us, if you run a company or if you're an individual creator, I think there's nothing to fear but fear itself. I know all these cliches are true, but we really urge for you to sort of lean in fast, fail forward, be an early adopter. That is why today 𝗟𝗟𝗃𝗃 has an advantage, right? You're early adopters. Of course, today the largest network of partnerships. And one of the case studies that I wanted to bring up, any one of you here heard of 𝗟𝗟𝗃𝗃? I'm sure some of you would have, yes. And of course, it has recently had a really bad reputation over what's happened. But I think the key point that I wanted to highlight today, right, we don't have a lot of time to go into the case study in detail. Granted, it's been hacked and had a disastrous run this year. But I think the key point that I wanted to highlight was that the key takeaway is the convergence of the crypto universe with online gaming in the form of 𝗟𝗟𝗃𝗃𝗃, right? Because this really marks an interesting shift, not only in the future of online gaming, but also in the growing importance of digital ownership. Again, harken back to the example I was giving, that most of us are now spending more and more of our time online, that digital ownership is about digital flex, right? Just as women buy their Birkin bags and want other women to see them carrying their Birkin bags, like increasingly digital flex in a metaverse space is going to be a real thing. And more importantly, I remember I was giving this case study, obviously a little bit longer, in Carnegie Mellon. And I remembered my students who were obviously very well heeled, right, because this is an elite university. And I remember my students raising their hands and saying, but madam, isn't this very exploitative to have people game for money? To which I responded, yes, if you're from Carnegie Mellon, because you have the luxury of saying that that's exploitative, because you have a means to other sorts of professions. But if you're from the Philippines, and this puts food on the table, and it separates you from either becoming a prostitute, or becoming a criminal, or being out of a job, like this is actually a very good way to go to work. So I think I'm not here to proselytize or change your mind or make all of you online gamers and go out there and immediately participate in 𝗟𝗟𝗃𝗃𝗃. But my point is to really start thinking about digital ownership as a real possible means to owning entities. And I'm not even asking you to look too far. If you look, for those of you who have children, if you look into just how much time they spend on their games, but also to look here in Singapore. I'm not saying that this is going to happen right here, right now, but I do see a growing population who are disenchanted with owning real property because it's overpriced and they just don't think that it's possible. So there is a possibility that increasingly folks are going to turn towards digital ownership as a real way of making money and having a real digital economy. And that is already happening, especially in a lot of developing countries. So that was exactly what I told my Carnegie Mellon students. And they sort of really started rethinking about this notion of exploitation, right? I think for most of us in a developed, privileged a world, we may think of gaming as just being very exploitative, but again, think of it as providing opportunity to folks in places that may not have the jobs that we have, right? But anyway, that for another day. So let me now take it to the sandbox. So what the sandbox really is that it is right now one of the most robust open metaverses. Why do I say it's one of the most robust metaverses? Because not only do they give you creator tools to create, they also actually have an open marketplace, right? And what it really aims to do is to have you own your digital assets, right? And it allows you to trade your digital assets as well. So what it is that it is a full ecosystem to allow you to create experiences using 3 integrated products to build, share, and monetize. So the 3 products are Vox Edit, Game Maker, and the marketplace. So yesterday and today, I think we ran 2 workshops on the Vox Edit. But also what it allows you to do in the sandbox is for you to build your own land, to create NFTs, to play to earn, and then you can obviously also own sand, right? So it gives you a means to digital currency and digital ownership. So this again is just a little map of the land that you can own, etc. Okay, so these are just telling you about the brands entering the metaverse with NFT interoperability. I'm not going to go into too much detail for the sake of time. I'm just watching the clock because I do want to leave some time for Q&A. But the point is that what we have done in Smobler Studios is to not just use the platform for gaming. What we have done is to create real-world business case scenarios in the sandbox. So for example, we actually launched the world's first concert venue because one of the things that we thought about over the pandemic is, because I'm a theatre director by training and a professor, and I started thinking what happens to all these entertainers, right, over the pandemic if they don't have a place to go. So one of the things that we did was we partnered with JJ Lane, who was known for being one of the winners in The Bachelor. So we created the world's first concert venue. And for those of you who are in the sandbox, I think there were a couple of hands, we urge you to go into Alpha Season 4 and you can try out the experience today. So just here's a quick little video on what it looks like in the sandbox. And having said that, I will also then take a question about why voxel, why not hyperreal metaverse? I'll take that in just a short while, but just watch the little trailer for now. Can we make it a little bit louder? Let me see. How do we make it louder? It's a rock concert, so it's got to be loud. How do I make it loud, Rod? Oh, okay. We can't make it louder? It's fine. We just have to imagine if you're in the metaverse. Can't make it louder. Yeah, we can without talking. Yeah, we have a couple more videos, so I think it's better with sound. So anyway, so that's an example of a rock concert. It didn't feel very rock because it was so quiet, so we're going to fix the sound. The other use case scenario that we actually got a lot of media attention for is the first digital wedding. So what it is that we actually had a wedding in the metaverse, and we also had obviously a real life wedding, right, on September 17th. So this is the first ever digital metaverse wedding. And so what we did was we actually got one group to be part of the entire wedding festivities. So our studio, what we did was we recreated one group's iconic landmark, which is the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 mansion, and we took that into the metaverse. And truth be told, when we first actually approached one group, they were very skeptical, and they said, like, we have a real world asset, like, why would I want to be in the metaverse? Like, there's no reason for me in the metaverse. And first off, they were very actually apprehensive about being voxelized, because we said, no, if anything, I want to be in a hyper-real metaverse. So maybe that's a good point for me to also segue and say, why voxel? Why not hyperreal? Again, I don't think I'm saying one or the other, because I think in true Web3 metaverse style, we really want to go for interoperability. That's exactly what we're talking about with Ashraf, right? That we're in such an early stages. It's like a telco, and every telco wants to build up their own brand and their own business and their own structures. But eventually, every telco needs to speak to every other telco. That is the point. But here we are now at the really early stages of Web3 in the metaverse, where every other platform is building out their own. And for us at Smobler Studios, we have to think where we want to invest our resources, because we don't have the one resource that we don't have enough of is time, right? So we decided we're going to invest a little bit more time in a voxel metaverse for these reasons. One, in such early days, I would rather invest my time in a voxel platform. Why? Because I'm spending more time creating stories. Because the last thing I want is to have to appeal to your vanity, and I mean that in the most objective way, is to appeal to your vanity when you tell me, that does not look like me at all. Because look at what happens when Mark Zuckerberg releases his avatar and people laugh at him and say, well, that's $10 billion and that's how you look like, right? Because I think, like, fundamentally as human beings, we have an expectation of what we look like. So in such early stages as a studio, we don't really want to invest too much time in hyperview metaverses because we feel like we'll be spending a lot of time trying to appeal to everyone, trying to make their avatars look better. That's one. But two, which is even more significant from a business case scenario, fundamentally, we think that there should be many ways of entering the metaverse, right? One of the things that one of the notions that I want to debunk is the fact, or one of the myths that I want to debunk is the fact that you have to use a device in order to enter the metaverse. So in order to answer that question, I need to ask you a question first, right? Why do you think Meta would want to push for a device? I'll break that down a little bit easier for you. What is Facebook fundamentally? What is Facebook fundamentally? Like, if you understand the reason why Meta has to push for a device, then you sort of got it. But let's break it down and just ask, like, what is Facebook fundamentally? Yeah, it's an advertising platform, and how do you access it? Like, is it a device? Is it a hardware? Is it a... It's a connection network, exactly, and how do you access it? You access it from a phone. Does Facebook own a phone? They don't. So think of yourself, if you're on a train, but you don't own the train tracks. So it's like your SMRT, you want to own the train and the train tracks. But here you have Meta that has a huge problem. They have billions of subscribers and users, but fundamentally they're always going to be held hostage by Apple. They're always going to be held hostage by Tim Cook. Tim Cook could say, I don't want to have your app on my phone. So that is why they do have to push this narrative that in order for you to access the metaverse, you need a device, because they need to go into device play. Right? It's pure business, but it's also very smart advertising to say that, right, I'm Meta and I own the metaverse. But these things do not correlate. It's like you and I getting together and saying, hey, we want to own the internet, so we're going to call our company Inter, and we own the internet. So I think that's one of the fallacies that I really want to debunk, but it's a very, very smart marketing ploy. And many people have really, truly begun to believe that the only way to enter the metaverse is through Meta's Oculus. So that's where I just want to debunk that fallacy. So back to why do I think that, at least for us at Smobler, for now, we are working with Sandbox to create these voxelized metaverses, also because they're very clear mobile strategy. And again, go back to my thesis on most of us access data today or internet today through mobile devices, right? So that's one of the reasons why we're there as well. Anyway, fast forward to, just to give your brain a little bit of a massage. Here is the wedding, and Rod, I hope the volume plays now, you think? We try. So this was the wedding that we created on September 17th, but we didn't create a wedding, it was a real wedding. Let's try it. Yeah? No, it's not playing. Should we try? Can we play the... Oh, not yet. We're figuring it out. It's in real time, guys. It's like real-time metaverse thing. It's happening. Can we try playing the video? If not, it's okay. Okay, we'll try. If not, just imagine. Oh, it's gone off. The screen's gone off. Let's try. Thank you. Volume? Yay. No volume.
You want to take Clara's child.
Can we turn it back?
To be loving and faithful, in place and in want,
Louder.
in joy and in sorrow,
Okay.
in sickness and in health, as long as you both struggle.
I do. It's a little bit soft, right? It's okay.
Congratulations! I now pronounce you man and wife.
We'll just imagine that it's louder, more festive. So the voice that you heard officiating wedding is the Sandbox CEO, Sebastian Bourget, who was the officiator for the wedding, for the first Metaverse wedding.
Joanne, you came back into my life when I least expected it. just at the right time as COVID restrictions eased and allowed dinner for two.
Who would have thought a simple text message would bring us here today, pledging our wedding vows to each other?
A surprise reply to my WhatsApp broadcast would spark a whirlwind romance with someone who's been right under my nose the past 8 years.
You are my best friend, my beacon of hope and support, and the love of my life.
I will cherish you, bring joy to you, and take you on a lifetime of dinners for two.
I don't know if you can hear that, but it was quite sweet and romantic. Only just imagine it, right? You're saying, I'll take you on a lifetime of dinners for two. But anyway, okay, so this was like the first ever Metaverse wedding. And again, key takeaways for that was that one, there is real world economy now, because like even one group has decided to purchase land and now wants to really build out in the sandbox, because they now see that there's actually real world economy and possibilities in hosting these Metaverse weddings, right? As well as other business opportunities as well. And just finally, one last thought that I wanted to leave you with and bring it all together was that one of the things that we did at Smobler, for better or for worse, maybe it's because we're foolhardy or just damn stupid, was that we categorically just came out and said that we're not going to do any very violent games, even though I know many people here love super violent games. But we actually really wanted to be true to our ethos, what we call ideals: inclusion, diversity, equity, access, leadership, love, sustainability. And we felt that, you know, children really can't be what they can't see. And I think that there are a lot of games now that appeal to those more violent, aggressive sensibilities. And we at Smobler just did not want to contribute to that, right? Is it a very difficult decision to make as a small startup? Yes, because we even had to say no to tobacco companies that would give us a lot of money. But we said this very early. We came out to the press, we issued press statements to say that. And you know, interestingly enough, I think what has been very, very heartening was that lots of brands do want to work with us because we say we're Metaverse for good. So brands like 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗲, you know, at Aventis Graduate School, the Food Bank, you know, DBS. I mean, a lot of folks actually do want to be able to work with us. And so I think we've been really blessed that we've stuck to our ethos and it served us well. So having said that, we've also had a collaboration with 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 is a family foundation. So the funders and the owners were from tech and financial industry, and they've appointed us as the custodians for their 12 by 12 land. Again, just to give you context, a 1 by 1 land in Sandbox is equivalent to 96 meters by 96 meters. Right? So 12 by 12 is, you can do the math, my math is bad, but you get it, right? So 1 by 1 is 96 meters by 96 meters, so 12 by 12 is incredibly huge. But the point I'm trying to make is they've given us, made us custodians of their land. So if you are a brand, if you're a company, if you have a brand story that you wish to collaborate with us in the sandbox, let us know, because our 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 Foundation has allowed us to use their land rent-free. So if you have a brand experience that you like to publish, let us know. I think the only cost that you have to pay for is just us building up the experience for you. But really what we intend to do is to create an entire ecosystem where brands can be really helping each other. I mean, one of my very cheesy inspirations was, you know, I don't know about you folks, but I grew up in the 70s watching Coca-Cola with like, I want to teach the world to sing, right? Everyone's holding hands, like you're laughing. Yeah, we're probably from the same era, but you know the ad, right? And I was thinking, you know, in real life, it's just so hard to create ecosystems like this, right? We talk about it, but it is hard, right? So we wanted to, in our own way at Smobler Studios, create an ecosystem of Metaverse for good, where we have brands who really want to help each other out and telling these good brand stories. So we already have onboarded a few brands, as I've told you. We are working with SG Enable to create an accessibility park, right, to create access for disabled and non-disabled communities. We have the Food Bank, as I shared. We have Aventis. We're also launching the first Singapore Sandbox Academy. We held a workshop yesterday. So just sort of breeze through this so that we can give us a little bit more time for questions. So this is just our barrier-free social hub in the access part. Again, when we came down to designing, we ensured that we remove stairs, we remove any kind of barriers to access, again to allow young people, going back to my thesis on children can't be what they can't see, right? So if they begin to see a barrier-free world, and if you want to be able to show up in your cane, or if you want to be able to show up in your wheelchair, you should be able to. But of course, you want to show up as a polar bear, you want to show up Superman and your avatar, you can. But I also think that why can't you just show up with all of you? If you want to show up in your wheelchair, you should be able to, right? So that's also what we want to be able to enable and be inclusive. So just more slides on that. This one I'll just elaborate a little bit because some people ask me on like what is an NFT and what is real world utility. So what we did for the food bank was we were very intentional even from the way we designed our NFTs, right? So the mascot is the food banker because Nicole, who's the CEO, she's also a mother and she has daughters and she says, well, I want to use one of my daughters as like the mascot, right? So okay, so her daughter became like the mascot, the food banker, because her objective is also to raise awareness for and reach out to a new group of crypto philanthropists, right? So that is a whole intention to raise a whole generation of young people who can donate because we don't always want to rely on old money, big check donations, but like we also want to fractionalize, democratize philanthropy, right? So a $10 check or $10 sand donation will be okay. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. So even from the way we design our NFTs, what we did was we wanted to appeal to a younger generation, and it was very literal in the early days. So for example, Food Bank actually has these real world assets, including a vending machine, because one of the things that Nicole, the CEO, thought about was that a lot of food insecure people have a lot of canned food, but they don't have hot meals. So one of the things that Food Bank pioneered is a vending machine that allows the food insecure to use a bank card and be able to access a hot meal when they want to. So what we did was to create the NFTs with that image, and we'll come to a corporate sponsor like, for example, DBS, and we'll say, hey, Budut, or hey, DBS, would you be a corporate sponsor or buyer of this NFT? Why? Because then we would go around Singapore and ensure we put your branding on all the vending machines in Singapore. So in many ways, what we did was to do a few things, right? One, we begin to make people understand what real world utility is. Very, very literal, especially in the early days. But two, it made it accessible because we allowed brands to work with us without thinking like they had to mint a wallet or any really wanted to also like, we recognize that there's a huge population there, right? The combined GDP of the 10 ASEAN countries was valued at 3.1 trillion, making ASEAN one of the biggest economies in the world. So what we really wanted to do was to allow them to take up programs. So together with Aventis, we raised a $1 million Metaverse for Good scholarship fund to allow them to enroll for an executive MBA program imbued with like Metaverse curriculum. Are these very early days? Yes. Is it foolproof? No, right? But we really wanted to empower some of our ASEAN scholars to really start thinking about business case scenarios in the Metaverse. How do you think of marketing campaigns in the Metaverse? How do you measure a gross Metaverse product, right? I think there'll be a time that we'll start thinking about gross Metaverse product, not just GDP, but how do you measure gross Metaverse product? So that's what, these are some of the initiatives. And like I said, we also launched the first Singapore Sandbox Academy. So this is also where I urge all of you, if you are keen to learn more about how to build the sandbox, or if your enterprise is keen to create your own little metaverse, come and speak to us because we'll be launching our academy soon. So finally, I think we're not here to sell you any vision of the metaverse, but just for you to really open your hearts and minds and begin to recognize that this is a change that is coming. And I think for us as creators, I was just sharing with Ashra, one of the things that really excites me was that in a short span of time, I've been able to hire about like 30 folks and give them work, right? And our company is scaling really quickly in under a year. I remember when I first started my theatre company, it was so hard to hire anybody. Right? And later on, of course, when I ran like a brick and mortar store, that was easier. I could hire over 70 to 100 folks. But in a short span of time in a year, I've been already able to hire 30 people and change 30 people's lives in the metaverse. So I do think there's real world opportunity, and the metaverse really presents jobs for and of the future that are being created as we speak. Right? So just these are just some pictures of what we did yesterday. And of course, you know about DBS's Better World. I'm just going to skip through this because I'll rather take questions. So finally, I'll just end with like a little quote or a call to action. If you want to get involved, come co-create with us, right, in the Sandbox. You can join our Sandbox Singapore Academy. Stay connected on social media. I'll give out my name cards later. I really am all about connecting. And finally, I really do think that all of you can really make a difference in this decentralized world. I mean, think about it. Is democracy an ideal? Yes, it is. It absolutely is, right? Is it messy? Yes, it is, right? But is there any other institutions I want to live in? No. So similarly, I offer you the possibility of actually owning your own data, owning your own digital identity. Is it messy now? Obviously. Is it arduous? Obviously. But is it something that is worth aspiring for? Isn't that what being human is all about? I absolutely think so. So I just want to end with a quote by Margaret Mead. Should never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, like all of you, because it really has been the only thing that ever has. So I urge you all to join us and jump in and help us co-create a metaverse for good. Thank you.